Rookie mistakes is probably when you're looking first to rent an apartment. Um, you might be looking with a broker, and then if you do that, you do have to pay a broker fee, which is usually the equivalent of 1 month's rent. So, like right up front, you might have to pay a broker fee, and then depending on the building, a security deposit, and maybe first and last month's rent all at the same time. So you want to make sure that you have some kind of nest egg built up, because I don't know if people anticipate that cost. There are also no fee buildings, so you can look. And again, you don't have to pay that broker fee, but you still probably would have to pay like a security and first month's rent upfront. So just know that going into it. And then depending on your salary, there is a requirement that you have to make, I forget what the exact number is, if it's like 40 times the rent um, to be even be qualified for the apartment. So a lot of times those first or second years, you're going to need your parents to co-sign on to the lease, because you're just not going to make that much money, especially if you're right at undergrad without like a master's. Again, if you're like a nurse or something, you'd probably be okay. But um, first off, yeah, you're probably going to need parents' help or a family friend who does very well to co-sign on it.
One of the challenges that, people are very excited, they're out on their own, got a little bit of money in their pocket, getting themselves established in their career. But the mistake that they make is they overextend themselves. And then what quickly follows is a feeling of being burnt out. And when I said overextend myself, I think that's socially, financially, career-wise, etc., that you kind of come into this guns blazing and want to have a great time and have all that the experience all that the city has to offer, and that's all well and good, and there is time for that. You don't need to do it all at once. So take a slower approach to getting yourself adapted. Establish a good routine of finding the work and life balance, finding things, reading, exercising, meditating, whatever it may be, to keep yourself balanced so that you don't get too over your skis and, you're burnt out, you're not getting good sleep, you're falling behind on your work assignments, the bills start to pile up. So I would say, don't overextend yourself. New York's not going anywhere. You'll have plenty of time to experience it all, and you don't need to do it all at once.
I would say moving to New York is definitely an adjustment. It's an intense city, but it's the best city in the world, in my opinion. Definitely give yourself time to adjust. And most of my friends that moved to New York, it took us about like 6 to 8 months to even just like get in the energy. So I would definitely recommend giving yourself time. Don't make any judgments too quickly. And in terms of rookie mistakes, I can't say like what what will happen or what won't happen, but definitely just giving yourself that grace and forgiveness to like fail and get back up again. I think in terms of like apartments, don't buy furniture ahead of time. Definitely buy furniture that fits within your apartment. When you're moving, definitely get movers. You don't want to deal with New York City parking tickets when you're moving in, and don't be afraid to be yourself and do what you want to do, even though you think other people might be doing something else.
For me, when I first moved to New York, I had to move to Long Island because that's where my business was. I would recommend looking for a spot in or around the city. I think commuting is a big portion of it. I would say 30, 40 minutes within that time range is probably a good commuting distance that's not going to tire you out or exhaust you. I also say probably don't move to Long Island just based upon my experience. Nothing against Long Island. It's a beautiful area. It's a great area to raise a family and just kind of grow up in and raise your kids in. But as a 22-year-old graduating from college, I would recommend being in and around the city. There's just a lot more going on.
As much life as there is in New York at all times, right? It can be a pretty lonely place sometimes. It's a big city, right? And sometimes you just feel like one person. If you maybe struggle to create or develop a solid network of friends here, or if you don't have family here, sometimes it can feel even more isolating. I would say that seasonal depression is also really a thing here. Getting cooped up in a small apartment sometimes when it's cold isn't really fun, but it makes it that much more special when the weather's nice, when you are able to develop a great network of friends in the city. It took me about 9 months, I would say, to really feel comfortable in New York, almost like it was my home. Up to that point, I felt like I was not struggling to stay afloat, but really trying to figure out my home and get comfortable in my new home, because it's pretty big and there's a lot of people here. So I'd say those are the classic challenges. The rookie mistakes, trying to fit in all of the classic New York staples, I would say, as soon as you move to the city, because really the things that I've liked the most about New York aren't the things that most people would think of when they think of New York City, like, going to a Broadway show or checking out a Knicks or Rangers game at the Garden. Some of my favorite experiences have been going to little bars and restaurants and exploring, new streets and new neighborhoods, and meeting friends through friends. Those kind of human to human interactions, connections, and honestly, you'd be hard pressed to find a city with better food than New York.
Definitely get the Metro card, especially when you start working. There's usually like a program called like WageWorks or something like that, where they'll take pre-tax income and put that towards your Metro card. It's cheaper if you do it that way than if you just do it like out of pocket after you get paid. Use the subway as much as possible because it's significantly cheaper. Definitely try to limit how many like Ubers and Lyfts you take, because that can add up really quickly. Cost savings, particularly make your own food or eat in when you can, just because if you get lunch like every day you're at the office, that adds up quickly. I guess definitely be selective. I know you're going to want to go out as much as possible. You're 22, you're 23, you're working really hard and you want to go and kind of have fun with your friends, but make sure you don't do it in a way that you put yourself in a bad spot financially. I think that's definitely a big thing. Well, in regards to looking at apartments, I would say live in the neighborhood like that you really want to live in, that you think is going to be the best fit for you, regardless of where your office is. Just because, for example, my first apartment, I lived on the Lower East Side and I could walk to work, which was great. But I only ended up being in that job for 6 more months after that apartment. And then I ended up having to, my new office was up in Midtown. So then I had a little bit more of a commute. So even though like I picked that apartment because of the proximity to work, things change, your job might change radically, and then you were stuck living in a place where you only did it because it was convenient for your job, and then your job is different. So that's just my take on like neighborhoods personally.
It's not as daunting as it seems. It certainly can be, but I think if you take the right measured approach, you can experience a lot that the city has to offer. I'm biased being from the area, but I think it's the greatest city in the world. Try to lean into those experiences, be it, going to museums, going to see some shows. There's tons of great comedy sellers to go to. You can see, your favorite comedian on a random Wednesday night. So while it may seem daunting, don't be afraid to experience new things in the city. But like I said, with a measured approach, you don't want to burn yourselves out too much. So, find that right balance of exposing yourself to new experiences while not overextending yourself.
My favorite things to do in New York is walk. Walking is the best part about New York, and exploring, being able to just like walk out of your door and look at and see something completely new and look at, experience different things. So I would definitely recommend walking as much as possible, and even getting a city bike membership. City bike is like a rental bike. They're all over New York City. You can easily get them, and a monthly membership will allow you to like go and explore new neighborhoods. But I would say just having that sense of adventure and definitely getting out there and exploring as much as possible.
I think navigating the city, a lot of it is just, it comes back to networking. I think like really when you're looking for an apartment, when you're looking for a job, if you're just trying to find a place to go out or a place to check out, I mean, clearly you can go to Google and look at, you know, what are the best places to go to. But I have found that just recommendations from people, really finding out like what are some cool spots that, you know, aren't mainstream, that people aren't aware of, not the touristy spots that everybody comes in and goes to in and around Times Square. I find that's the best way to navigate the city. And sometimes I just want to leave my apartment and just walk around and explore. I think that's been probably one of the most beneficial things for me. It's fun. I find new places. And you know, it's all about that exploration of this cool city.
So getting as comfortable with the subway system as possible, I would say, is a must in the early stages of your time in New York City. The subway is not the most glamorous form of transportation, but I promise you that it's the most efficient form of transportation, even when it can give you a hard time. On the surface, it can take a lot of time for cars and trucks and buses to get around. The subway, I think, is everyone's lifeline. And I know people who are starting their jobs to take the subway to and from work. And I know people who are pretty senior in their jobs and they've been living and working in New York for 20 years who still take the subway to work. I would say that's a very important piece of navigating the city. Otherwise, when the weather's nice, I would encourage anyone to just walk around and get to know the streets and get to know the surroundings and be comfortable with how neighborhoods are connected and the best way to get from one place to another. And in doing so, you can also become more comfortable with New York and, you know, having it feel like you're home too.
The energy here, like you're not going to find anything else like it. And there's always a new restaurant, a new neighborhood, and there's just, you never know like when you might have like a really great night out and you're like, I never would have been able to have a night like that if I lived anywhere else. And there's always like a really beautiful element of surprise here. You never know that, you know, one night out, or, you know, I did an intramural volleyball team, you know, years ago, and I ended up meeting one of my best friends, like because we were on the same team. And I never would have thought like, oh, hey, you're going to join this intramural volleyball team and you're going to meet like one of your best friends moving forward. I never would have thought that that would have been possible. So there's just an energy. You're going to meet really smart, interesting, ambitious people who are from all over the country, because, you know, New York pulls from all over the place. You're going to meet really interesting people depending on your job, or just, you know, depending on where you go out. Definitely throw yourself into different activities, you know, based on your interests, whether it's like a kickball league or soccer. There's always something to do here. And there are a lot of free activities too. Even just exploring Central Park, or, you know, I had a friend and I where we would pick one neighborhood and explore it and like just find new restaurants and things like that. And that's always kind of how I've discovered the best places, is you just walk by this little like Italian place, you're like, oh, that looks good. And then you go in and you're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So there's just so much to do, and there's really kind of a wonderful element of kind of anything's possible. You never know where you might meet a new friend or discover something you really love as an activity, maybe a new neighborhood that maybe that's where you want to live next.
It's the friends and the network that I've made. You know, New York and living in the city isn't for everybody, but for those that are, you're going to find these are like-minded individuals that you can really develop strong bonds and relationships with. And I think once you find, you know, once you're in the working world, you're out of school, you've graduated, sometimes it's tough to establish those types of networks. You know, you'll have your work friends, but you don't want to lose that sense of camaraderie that you may have had from, you know, St. Joe's, from being in school, being a part of a sports team, a club, etc. But what I found is if you find some individuals who also want to live in the city, they can be very like-minded to yourself, career driven, common interests outside of work. Maybe you both love theater and you like to go to shows together. You find common interest in the professional world. So the network that I've been able to establish with great friends, and they're not just colleagues. These are friends that I've made that I hope that I have in my life for many, many years. So that has been a really great benefit, is to meet other like-minded, professionally driven individuals.
Being able to walk out of your door and experience something new every day and explore all the time. There's always something going on. There's always something to do if you're bored or something like that. But definitely just the energy and the ability to like walk out your door and not know what's gonna happen.
Honestly, the exploration of the city, like there's always stuff going on. There's like whether you want to go out to a bar, a restaurant, a show, live music, just walk around and experience the vibes. Museums, there's Central Park, there's just so many different things that you can do at any time. If you're a morning person, if you're a night person, there's something for everyone. It's always lively. There's always stuff going on, and I feed off of that energy, and that's why I think, as a kid coming from a small town where I grew up, I live and feed off the vibe of the city.
Favorite part of living in New York has kind of changed as I've changed, quite honestly. When I moved to the city, I was a single guy. I lived with 2 single guy roommates, and we were out all the time, meeting people, making friends, going to different bars and restaurants. I eventually became a taken man, and I'm now living in New York with my fiance, and that's a different experience. And she and I, we love to get out and explore the city, try new neighborhoods, try new restaurants, new food. I'd say my favorite part nowadays of living in New York is bar hopping and having a good beer, or pizza hopping and having a good slice or 2 or 3 or 4, just trying new foods, trying new restaurants. The city just has so many great places to try.
Probably anything like walking around Central Park or kind of touring different spots like St. Patrick's Cathedral, any of the parks. I'm a big runner, so I've trained for a couple of marathons. So there's so many cool paths like up the West Side Highway and Battery Park, really good people watching too. There's different museums and exhibits you can always kind of check out, or like meetup groups too, that are free, and also another way to get to meet more individuals as well.
Yes, it can be a very expensive city. And if you want to go to a 5-star restaurant and get a box seat at the Yankees games, by all means, and you'll have a great time. However, there are tons of inexpensive activities to do in the city. It's not such a concrete jungle. You could go out on the West Side Highway, which they've really built up with walkways, bike paths, parks. Central Park is a beautiful place to get together with friends. Though there is Broadway, there are a lot of off-Broadway shows where you can get cheap tickets on a weeknight or a matinee show. There's a lot of great comedy clubs in New York City too, and those are inexpensive. And even going on a weeknight, you can see some pretty awesome comedians that you wouldn't expect to see. There are just as much ways to have inexpensive fun in New York City.
I would definitely recommend, as I said, walking everywhere. Walking is free. And it will, honestly, you can have like a great day if you just like walk around New York with a friend all day long. There's also a ton to do in New York that's free. There's always like inexpensive performances. A lot of museums in New York are, if you're a New York City resident, you can pay as you wish, or they have free, First Fridays are free in a lot of museums in New York. There's also, like the Staten Island Ferry, going to Governor's Island are great ways to kind of see different parts of the city. I think both of those are like $1 or under $5. So if you are looking to find something inexpensive, then definitely there's stuff out there for you. New York City also has amazing parks. I live really close to Central Park, and walking around, you can probably tell I love walking. Walking around in New York is in those parks, and sitting, having a coffee with your friends is a great activity in itself.
Just walking around, like leave your apartment, walk around the city, explore. That's been the most fun for me. I like to run too, so going for a run on the West Side Highway or the East River around Central Park. It's good exercise, doesn't cost anything. Some other ways to get some exercise for free, you can take, or almost free, you can hop on the train, take a little bit north of the city, and go for a hike. There's actually really good hiking in and around New York City. Or you can even just hike through Central Park. The park's pretty big, and it's fun to explore. There's so many different aspects of it. I think some other just things that cost money but aren't too expensive. I like to check out breweries in and around New York City. A quick subway ride. You can try a couple beers and then be on your way. And then there are different lists that you can sign up for to just be aware of, like wine tastings, liquor tastings, different events that you can just come in and they're free. So I would recommend looking into those, but there's quite a bit that you can do. And I think the last thing I'll say that's relatively cheap is museums. Like New York City has a ton of museums. They're inexpensive. They're really cool to check out.
I know it might not look it from the street, but it really is a beautiful place. Central Park it's a joy, it's a wonder, it's a treasure, honestly. And it's something that I wish that I took advantage of more through the seasons, just going for a walk in Central Park, a run in Central Park, biking around Central Park, ice skating in Central Park. With the exception of biking and ice skating, which has some nominal value or price, it's all free and it's all fun to do, and it allows you to kind of live and breathe in your home and be a part of the fabric that is New York City. The Hudson River Trail is another piece of natural beauty. Same thing with the East River Trail. Spent a lot of time walking and running along both rivers. There are a ton of monuments and landmarks in New York City, like the Empire State Building, Times Square, the Battery, Liberty Island, Ellis Island, Governor's Island, where they're not really expensive to enjoy. The Empire State Building, sure, it's a hefty fee to get up to the roof, but getting to an island, it's the cost of the subway fare. Walking around a park is completely free. New York has world-class museums. You can find one in almost every neighborhood, and they're not just art museums. These are museums dedicated to film, dedicated to journalism, dedicated to many different varieties of art, and they don't have very expensive admission fees, and a lot of them have events. The city's also done a really great job in recent years of taking some of its old parts and making them newer and making them more inviting. On the west side of Manhattan in particular, there's now Little Island, which is really a fun place to walk along by the Hudson River. There's the High Line, which ended up being such a success in New York City that it's being replicated in other cities. You can kayak for free in the Hudson River. They're building a little beach just for walking on the Hudson River. They're building a beach in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and they say you're actually going to be able to wade in those waters. In Brooklyn and in Queens, there are even beaches too, like Coney Island and the Rockaways. So there's so much that you can see and do and explore, and it's not going to break the bank.